Okay, so let's think about the Grail in terms of the relationship between desire and longing.
Hmm.
Because in a way, certainly in the story of Parsifal, he can desire a second crack at the Grail. I don't want to be too much of a plot spoiler, but he has an encounter earlier on in his life. He's not quite ready for that moment, and the real digging for Parsifal will be this one question: how do you find, by an act of will, something you once encountered as an act of grace? Is that even
Mhm.
possible? But all the way through Parsifal is the story of, it begins with the desire of a young man, and then as an older man that moves into spiritual longing. And spiritual longing is absolutely not the same thing. My desire is to do with books, as you can see around me, and my desire these days could be met fairly frequently and immediately. However, longing, and we learn this in the Irish tradition, they always say that you will experience something back from longing, but it'll rarely come in the shape that you are expecting. It
Mhm.
comes in some other way. It comes in some more refined way. God is not going to necessarily give you what you want. He's going to give you what you need. And the duress that Parsifal is under takes us back to a very essential thing in all myths: no pressure, no diamond. No pressure, no diamond, until you are forced into certain crisis, certain kind of acuity of circumstance. You're not really going to be able to get past the inebriation of your passions and into something deeper. Uh, so it's a story that never lets us go in a way. It's a story for somebody that's 90. It's a story for somebody that's 16, you know.
Hmm. Do you think that, I mean, related to, do you think that in some ways failing to recognize the Grail or failing to be able to grasp it is part of the story, that it almost has to happen to the hero so that he can ultimately reach that true longing?
Mm. My question will be, halfway through Parsifal, the question I'll ask everybody is, what question have you failed to ask? What question have
Mhm.
you failed to ask? Give yourself a few days to think about that, because I can guarantee you somewhere there's been a great abdication. You will have had a moment of tremendous potential that then sailed away. And the wonderful thing that we learn from fairy tales is that often these opportunities will come round again. When you think, for example, in folk myths, oh, once upon a time there was three brothers, there were three sisters. One of the ways you can enjoy that is the first two times the invitation to the quest comes, you blow it, or you're too focused on having a career or whatever it is. But the third time it comes around, which could be when you're 65, it's a matter of life and death. And
Mhm.
so the younger brother in you, the younger sister in you, is the one that's going to have the adventure. And so I like the fact that the door of mercy is still open, a crack. And going back to what you just said, in a way, it's crucial that Parsifal doesn't know the question. There'd be no story. He's too young, in a way,
Mhm.
to know the question. And it reminds me of a story that you and I really love, Gawain and the Green Knight. Whereas I always feel at the end, Gawain, for the rest of his life, when he reaches on the back of his neck, there's that scar tissue. Man, that's going to be better than any book award he ever wins, or any podcast, or anything. Because I remember saying this once: in your incompleteness is your authenticity. You don't have to stay there. You know, we're working on theosis, but in your incompleteness is your authenticity. Get to know yourself in that fashion.
Mm.
And then know that against all conceivable odds, God is still unutterably interested in you. That's my miracle. It's like, how can that fella even gaze in my direction, at this point? But somehow he does.
Yeah, your insight, I think, is because it is mysterious. It is mysterious when you look at some of these stories that there is an aspect of failure, especially in Sir Gawain, because he ends where he feels like he hasn't succeeded, like he has a kind of shame that he carries. Um, but all the other characters are telling him, "No, you did great.
Mm.
You know, you're wonderful." And so that I think that my modern self that's used to watching, movies with heroes and used to watching, Sylvester Stallone finish with a, Uzi shooting down all the bad guys. There's something about it that is disturbing. This weakness that is so on the forefront of the story. Um, but I think that you've just said is giving me insight into that, is that in some ways we as Christians, we don't believe that we're sufficient,
No,
that there is. Yeah.
I I notice, over now, almost 30 years of working with groups of people, you never bring a room together in solidarity when you just give them victory stories. Never.
Mm,
What is astonishing is when somebody stands up and says, "For better or for worse, I'm struggling, and I'm struggling with this." Now, that doesn't mean that you are just behaving in a typical kind of, I often talk about the addiction to disclosure that we seem to have these days. I'm not talking about that, but it is your capacity to just stand up and be real and say, I am exhausted. And I mean, there's a lovely Irish expression. They often, the Shanachie, the storytellers, often begin a story with this note. They say, "How can I be with you if I am not sad?" And everybody just goes, "Oh." And there's just a place at the table for our sorrows and our incompleteness and our confusions, but we persist anyway. And so you don't get drowned in it, but you allow it a place at the table. And so, in the old Irish myths, they always have these fellows called so and so, say, Con of the 100 battles. Well, part of having 100 battles is not that you succeeded every time, but you made your failure sufficiently insightful and beautiful that it becomes something that you can give other people.
hmm.